at the end of the day, everything is either what they say is like fear or love, and fear is a call for love. So everything is either love or a call for love. And that's where like the metaphysics bottoms out in this incredibly useful way. Because we all, every single day, every single person, you, me, everyone listening to this has gone through some experience, probably every hour, where we either like act out of fear or we respond as if fear is real and not a call for love, right? Like to be able to just slowly but surely reclaim more of those as like, oh yeah, this is actually a chance to love is a movement into like a crazy good life. It's a movement from hell to heaven, basically, right? Because in hell, it's like, oh, fear. There's something that could be threatened. There's something here. Like, let's say, this morning I've got a 6-week old at home and a 22-month-old, and my wife, my toddler woke up a little early, woke up crying, and I didn't know why, and that was easy to see as a call for love, right? I'm like, oh, he's scared of something. I think he was like, grandma. He loves his grandma, and I was like, oh no, he must have had a bad dream where something bad happened with grandma. And so that's like easy to see as a call for love. But it was really early. My wife didn't sleep enough, and so she snapped at me, and I just snapped back. I didn't see it as a call for love. And it took me a second to see my snapping as a call for love and treat myself with love instead of treat myself with judgment. And so that's where like the metaphysics bottoms out as like over and over again throughout your day, throughout every moment, seeing where you're separating and you're seeing basically non-godliness or non-love or non-presence, or if you're more of kind of an emptiness, non-dual guy, it's like where you're believing that in your thoughts, you're believing that yourself is real. You're believing that you exist outside of the you that's separate, that's anything other than just being awareness. And so we basically project it out onto someone or something. Like this morning with my wife, like she snapped at me. I'm a victim of her snapping at me. This is a way basically for me to avoid my guilt. Like at some deep basic level, the course is saying that like, and I think this is basically right, that like we in that moment, I'm like somehow secretly in my being of beings, like aware that I'm separating from her, and that's fake, and I feel guilty about that. You could say that I'm in that moment. I've done the creation story, right? I've separated. I've stepped out of the Garden of Eden in that exact moment. A take home practice would be like look for what you flinch from as something that you can accept in your identity, and see if you can embrace more of it. So, for example, I had a client the other day that was like, "Oh, I don't want to admit that I'm self-judgmental." And like we've been over the course of a few weeks, he's looking at anger, and it was like, "Well, you've got a lot of anger towards yourself in the form of self-judgment," and he just couldn't see it. Now he's seeing it, but he doesn't want to admit it. And I'm like, basically you can expand your identity to include more. Yes, you're a nice guy, you're a sweet guy, everyone likes you. Also, you're self-judgmental. Also, some people don't like you. Also, boom, 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 and like you just slowly but surely expand more and more of who and what you're able to say I am to. And at the end of the day, you end up being I am to everything, and there's no flinching. So I think that's like the take home is like say I am to one more thing that you weren't willing to identify as part of you. Okay, yeah. So I don't know what's the hard ones are like maybe like have you ever heard a critique of me that you can share?
Of
You don't even
you?
have to buy into it. Yeah, you can be like that person's so wrong.
You want me to share a critique of you?
Yeah.
You're Pollyannish.
I'm Pollyanna-ish. Yeah, great. Perfect. This is a good one. So yeah, so if there's any resistance in me to saying yes to that, then it's like that's where the forgiveness work lies. That's I actually feel it in my heart. There's like a tremble in my heart. I don't want to admit that there's something in me that's Pollyanna-ish. And this one's a really cool one because it shows me two turning aways. One, the willingness to be a Pollyanna and be seen as that, and two, whatever the fuck I'm turning away from with the Pollyanna. So I'm like, oh wow, there's some work for me to like expand and include more. I mean, I'm not that reactive, so maybe there's not that much work here. Um, Yeah, and that doesn't mean that I'm also not realistic, right? Like you basically just include more in a way. It sounds like it's a paradoxical, but it's kind of like Walt Whitman saying, like, "Do I contradict myself? Yes, I contain multitudes." We're just all of it. So yeah, so then what happens is, like, on deep psychological philosophical level, is that that turning away, that flinching away from something at the end of the day is flinching away from that feeling of having separated from God. Feeling that we are responsible for not being enlightened is another way to say it.
What does it mean to flinch away from God?
I think that you're so smart and capable, and I love that we get to connect. Did you feel any resistance to receiving the truth of that?
Yeah.
That resistance is the flinch away from God. And then on the other side, it's or on another side, let's say not the other side. Let me do mine, especially in relationship to Pollyanna. Like, there's this feeling, there's this immense terror of really looking at the idea that, like, maybe, hmm, yeah, that maybe I actually am responsible for um, not being one with God, and that's the to face that and to feel into that feeling. Like, I feel literally my belly gets kind of royally, and to face that and feel it and stay in, and you'll notice, like, you'll keep flinching, you'll start randomly thinking about something else, or you'll go on talking about some other random bullshit in a podcast instead of staying with that feeling and just being like, ow. And eventually you can do that with God, right? You're like, it's okay because I know. And that's where the Course in Miracles metaphysics is extremely helpful. You're like, that isn't actually true. That feeling of primordial guilt, of original sin, of, there's like a psychological way of saying this, like in NARM, the neuroaffective relational model of healing developmental trauma, is the connection trauma, is this feeling like I don't belong here. I don't deserve to exist in reality. That's the feeling I think that you're learning to face and be like, it's okay. I am here. So this is a lie. That I am one with God. And so I can face this feeling fully and embrace it and allow it to be present until I see through it. It looks like the same action to do something that's like playing a part in the world stage, where you're not locked into an individuated identity. You're inhabiting individuated identity, and you're not believing it. You're playing with it, and that's the real invitation. Is like, you're not believing it. You're playing with it, and part of what you're playing is the game of forgiveness of your the world is a classroom rather than a stage. Is a better way to say it. And everything that comes across in this classroom is stuff that for me to learn and let go of. And this is really nice because then you also can drop this idea of perfection. Like, this happens a lot with, like, enlightenment or like kind of non-dual teachings, where, like, you assume that you're going to eventually get there one day, and then it's like it's a real bad setup, because then if you either then inevitably something's going to happen when you get reactive, right? Like, you're gonna, so I don't know, whatever, someone grifts you, and your wife's gonna snap at you. You're gonna The president that you don't like gets elected. The, like, or awful. You see awful things in the news every day. Someone gets beheaded. Some innocent child gets drowned or shot or whatever. Like, there's just, like, awful things that are happening, and you're going to see that. And then if you think, if you have any sort of reaction at all, you're going to think either I must not be enlightened, and that sucks because you kind of, like, separate from God and, like, leave the garden right then and there, right? Or you have to hide that from yourself because it's going to break your identity of what enlightenment means or what being woken up means or something like that. And so in order to maintain the idea of what you think it means to be a non-dual dude, you have to push that experience away instead of saying yes to it and embracing it and allowing it and moving on. So there's a real nice allowance of this kind of infinity of unfolding that I think A Course in Miracles invites us to. I certainly feel it's important, and it's part of what we bring with whatever I'm doing with relatefulness, with uptrust, with all of that. It's like bringing in this kind of allowance of unfinishedness. Another way to say it would be like, you know, an ever perfecting quality, or being is becoming, being is creative.